Hi, everybody, and welcome back. I'd like to share a fable from the collection of Aesop's fables. This one's called The Ants and the Grasshopper. Let's get started. One bright day in late autumn, a family of ants were bustling about in the warm sunshine, drying out the grain they had stored up during the summer, when a starving grasshopper, his fiddle under his arm, came up and humbly begged for a bite to eat. "What?" cried the ants in surprise. "Haven't you stored anything away for the winter? What in the world were you doing all last summer?" "I didn't have time to store up for any food," whined the grasshopper. "I was so busy making music that before I knew it, the summer was gone." The ants shrugged their shoulders in disgust. "Making music, were you?" they cried. "Very well, now dance." And they turned their backs on the grasshopper and went on with their work. All right, so the moral of the story here is there's a time for work and there's a time for play. And it looks like in this story, the grasshopper spent too much time playing and not enough time working. Today, what I'd like to do with this story is I'd like to talk to you guys a little bit about a narrator. Okay, so when we're thinking about a narrator, you can think about a couple things. The first thing is if the story is told in first person, that means a character in the story is telling the story. You'll hear some keywords like I, me, we, us, different words like that. If it's second person, this reads more like a cookbook. Somebody would say, "You first mix blah 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 blah, then you stir blah 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 blah." And then third person is when this narrator is not part of the story, and the narrator can see everything, can hear everything, can know everything. So what I'd like to do with you today is just analyze the ants and the grasshopper, thinking about the story. So the first question, who is the narrator to the story? I'm thinking the narrator is a storyteller who can see everything the ants and the grasshopper are doing. The narrator is not a character in the story. So, if we're thinking about first person, second person, or third person, well, if it's told in first person, that would mean that the ants are telling the story or the grasshopper is telling the story. And in this case, I don't think either one is telling the story. Second person would be some directions, or it would be talking directly to me as a series of steps, and that's not happening here. So I'm going to go with the third person. The story is told in third person since the narrator is not a character within the story. All right, evidence. All right, let's take a look here. And it says, one bright day in late autumn, a family of ants were bustling about in the warm sunshine. So here we were thinking about the narrator is telling about the setting. The grasshopper, well, let's say neither the grasshopper nor the ants are the ones talking about the setting. Okay, if we read a little bit closer, it says, "What?" cried the ants in surprise. "I didn't have time to store up any food," whined the grasshopper. So I'm going to say the dialogue, or the words that the characters used, the dialogue is written in third person. We'll give an example here. "What?" cried, and then I'm going to underline this, the ants in surprise. And let's see, the next one is, "I didn't blah 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 blah," whined, and then the grasshopper. So in this situation, we can see that the narrator is talking about the ants, the narrator is talking about the grasshopper, but neither the grasshopper nor the ants are the ones that are actually telling the story. So now, one of my favorite questions is, how could this same story be told a little bit differently? So how would the story be different if the author used a different point of view? Let's try this here. So if the author wrote this story in first person, the ants might talk about their experience of all the work they did. The ants would have more detail about all the work and might also possibly talk about how they planned to get everything done. So if the ants told the story rather than the narrator, we might have the ants tell a whole lot more about the process. If the author, let's see, if the author wrote the story in first person from the grasshopper's point of view, we might actually learn a little more about what the grasshopper actually did for fun. See, right now we don't really know exactly what the grasshopper did other than just sang and danced and played all that music and all that good stuff. But we don't really know. So when we have it in third person, we know some of the ants and we know somewhat about the grasshopper. But in this situation, if the grasshopper or the ants told the story a little bit differently, we might understand the story a little bit differently. All right, so this is the case. What we've just done is the case in any fictional piece of work. There's always a narrator, and the story is told in first, second, or third person. And by using some of the methods that I just showed you, you can figure out if it's in first person, second person, or third person. And when we see that, we start to understand the viewpoint. We start to understand how the story is changed based on who the narrator is, which narrator is telling the story. If you have any questions or anything, please let me know. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you in the next video.